She came home humming. Not because she was happy to see me. Not because she missed me. No, she was humming because she didn't think I'd be there. The sound stopped the second she saw my shoes by the door. There was a pause, barely half a second, but long enough to register. Like a mistake she hadn't planned for. Like a code she forgot to erase. I watched her drop her keys slower than usual, watched her force a smile that only reached one side of her mouth. And I didn't say a word. I didn't move. I just sat there on the couch, lights off, laptop open but untouched, a glass of water in my hand I'd been holding for hours without drinking. She didn't ask why I was sitting in the dark. She knew, and I think she knew that I knew. Still, she went for her usual routine, walked straight to the kitchen, opened the fridge like it wasn't silent in the room, like the air wasn't 10 degrees colder, like her perfume didn't carry a stranger's cologne clinging to it underneath. I didn't ask where she'd been. Not this time. I had asked too many times already. Book club, drinks with Kara, late at work, needed a drive, needed space. I used to believe her. I really did. Until last Thursday, when I saw her car parked at the edge of Meadow Lane, windows fogged, her silhouette shifting in the passenger seat of a black SUV I didn't recognize. I didn't approach. I didn't knock on the glass. I didn't scream or record or even cry. I just stood there, motionless, watching my wife kiss a man who wasn't me like I hadn't existed for the past 6 years of her life. She didn't see me. That night, I left her dinner in the microwave and asked how her meeting had gone. She said it was boring. I nodded. And now here we were. Her humming gone. Her confidence cracked. Her walking slower, pretending not to notice I was still watching her. Then she finally turned around and said it. Out loud. Dead calm. I feel nothing for you. As if it was the most ordinary thing to say to the man who once held her while she sobbed over her mother's funeral. As if it meant as little as asking me to pass the salt. I nodded again. Not because I understood, but because I had no more fight left. And that night, I packed a bag. Not because she told me to, but because, for once, I needed to do something that didn't involve waiting for her to feel something again. What I didn't expect was what she'd do once she saw me with someone new. I didn't slam the door. I didn't write a letter or leave a dramatic note on the kitchen counter. I didn't even look back at her when I walked past. All I took was a duffel bag with a few clothes, my laptop, and my toothbrush. That's it. I didn't want anything that smelled like her, touched her, or reminded me of the way things used to be. I didn't even take the coat she gave me last Christmas, the one I used to love. Somehow, it felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a friend's couch lined up or a hotel booked. I just drove. I remember the gas tank was almost empty, and I didn't care. I was ready to run out of fuel in the middle of nowhere, curl up in the back seat, and disappear for a while. That honestly sounded better than sitting across from her at another silent breakfast table pretending we were still okay. For the first 3 nights, I stayed in a cheap roadside and outside of town. The kind with buzzing neon signs and vending machines that only took exact change. I lived on microwave burritos and black coffee, scrolling through old text messages from her like an idiot. I kept staring at the last one she ever sent me before I left. Don't do anything rash. That's all it said. Not, please stay, not, let's talk. Just a warning to behave, like I was a child throwing a tantrum instead of a man watching his marriage rot in real time. I started calling in sick to work. At first it was just one day, then another, and by the end of the week I had no idea what day it even was. I stared at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the guy blinking back at me. My hair looked greasy. My eyes had that sunken, sleepless look. I'd always been the dependable one. Predictable, boring, stable. The guy who remembered anniversaries and brought soup when she was sick. The guy who once carved her initials into a tree at the lake where we kissed for the first time. Now I looked like a washed-up ghost. And then she texted me. Out of nowhere, at 2:13 a.m. on a Wednesday. It said, "Where are you?" I didn't answer. She tried again the next day. "Are you okay?" Again, I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't know what I'd say. How do you respond to someone who told you to your face that you mean nothing? What language do you even use after that? But I'll admit something I hate to admit. I checked her socials. I didn't want to, but I did. Her profile picture was still the two of us. That messed with me more than I expected. Because if I was really so worthless, why keep that photo up? Was she too lazy to change it? Or was it just a game? Some psychological breadcrumb trail to keep me wondering doubting, aching. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. A photo of her, alone at the lake. Our lake. The caption? Just breathing. It shouldn't have mattered. But it did. Because she wasn't there alone. Not really. I knew that tree in the background. The same tree I carved our initials into. And it wasn't visible in the photo, but I knew for a fact, just behind that tree, there was a bench. The same bench where we once made plans for our future. That spot didn't just appear in her mind by accident. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept spinning. Was she trying to send a message? Was she remembering what we used to be? Or was it some passive-aggressive jab, like, look where I am and where you're not? It broke me again. But the real shift didn't happen until 4 days later, when I walked into a bookstore just to pass time and saw her. Not Cora. Someone else. Someone new. And she saw me too. Her name was Marin. I didn't know it at the time. All I saw was a woman sitting cross-legged on the floor of the bookstore, flipping through an old poetry collection like the rest of the world had gone quiet. There was something unapologetically calm about her, like she'd found peace in the chaos, and I stood there like a wrecked stranger who hadn't felt stillness in weeks. I didn't mean to say anything. I really didn't. I was just there to waste time and maybe pick up a book I'd never read. But she looked up. She actually looked at me, not through me. And in a voice that sounded like she'd known me in another life, she said, "You look like someone who's running from something." I didn't even deny it. I just let out a laugh, one of those ugly, tired laughs that carries more weight than sound, and sat down across from her. We didn't flirt. We didn't talk about relationships or feelings or anything that deep. We just talked about books. She asked what I liked, and I told her I used to read poetry but stopped because life got in the way. She smiled and said, "Life doesn't get in the way. People do." I remember how that line landed like a punch. We talked for nearly an hour, right there between the worn-out bookshelves. When she stood up and tucked the poetry collection under her arm, I fully expected that to be the end of it. A nice, fleeting conversation with a stranger. One of those rare human moments that didn't need to go anywhere. But then she said, "There's a coffee place around the corner. I could use a break. Want to come?" I almost said no. I almost walked out and went back to the motel and curled up in that cold, scratchy blanket to replay Cora's words in my head like a loser. But something about Marin's eyes stopped me. They weren't demanding or flirty or intense. They were simply open. So I said yes. And we went. We sat on the patio under a faded red umbrella while a storm threatened in the distance. We talked about childhood dogs, the worst movies we ever paid money to see, and what we'd do if we had one day left to live. She said she'd drive west until the road ended. I said I'd call everyone I loved just to say I was sorry. She stared at me a long second after I said that. Then she said, "You don't owe everyone an apology just because someone broke you." And I swear, I nearly cried right there. We parted ways after 2 hours. No numbers exchanged. No promises. Just two people who crossed paths at exactly the moment one of them needed a reason not to give up completely. But fate? Or irony? Or whatever twisted force runs the show these days, it wasn't done with me yet. 2 days later, I saw Cora. It was late afternoon. I had gone back to that bookstore, maybe hoping to run into Marin again, or maybe just clinging to a place that didn't hurt. I was walking toward the parking lot when I saw her. Cora, standing next to her car, holding her phone like it was a lifeline. She looked up. Her eyes landed on me. And I swear to God, I saw her face break open. Not physically, but something in her collapsed. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I didn't even slow down. But she did. She started walking toward me like she was chasing something that had slipped through her fingers too fast. "Ellis," she called out. I kept walking. "Ellis, wait." And when I turned around, she looked like she'd just realized something unbearable. She looked regretful, like she wasn't ready for me to be okay without her. I hadn't seen that expression on her face in years. Not on our wedding day, not during our last anniversary, not even when she told me she felt nothing for me. It wasn't guilt or anger or pride. It was panic. Quiet, raw panic. Like she had walked into a burning room thinking it was empty, only to find me standing in the middle of it with no intention of moving. She stopped a few feet away, eyes wide, breathing uneven. She tried to say something, but it got caught in her throat. I just stood there, watching her struggle to form words. For once, the silence wasn't mine. "Ellis," she finally said, quieter this time. "I've been trying to find you." I blinked. "Why?" She hesitated. She didn't expect the question. I just needed to talk. To explain. Explain what? I asked, and my voice surprised even me. It wasn't shaky or sad or begging. It was just, done. Cora stepped closer, clutching her phone like a shield. I didn't mean for it to come out the way it did that night. I was confused. I wasn't thinking straight. You left so fast, and I didn't know what to do. I cut her off. You told me you felt nothing. I was angry, she said quickly, almost tripping over the words. I didn't mean it like that. I thought you'd come back, that you'd call. But you didn't. You just disappeared. You told me I didn't matter, I said, calmer than I felt. Why would I call someone who looked me in the eye and said I meant nothing? She was tearing up now. I could see it, plain as day. Cora, this woman who once rolled her eyes when I got emotional during a movie, was shaking on a sidewalk like she'd just been hit by a truck. Ellis, I was stupid, she said, voice cracking. I kept telling myself I needed more, that I was missing something. But after you left, I started waking up every day hoping I'd see your car in the driveway. I even went back to the lake. I sat on that bench for an hour, just hoping you'd show up. My jaw tightened. So that post wasn't some poetic game or a vague breadcrumb. She really had gone back. To a place that once meant something to both of us. Why now? I asked. Why are you here? She wiped her cheek with her sleeve and gave a sad little shrug. Because I saw you. Yesterday. With that woman. There it was. Everything snapped into place. The rush. The panic. The sudden desire to talk. She wasn't reaching out because she'd had a change of heart. She was reacting. To me smiling with someone else. To me not looking broken anymore. She's not my girlfriend, I said. Cora's expression shifted. Relief, jealousy, confusion. It flickered so quickly I couldn't pin it down. But, I added, she looked at me like I still mattered. Even if just for an afternoon. She took a step back. I saw her pride slipping beneath the weight of everything unsaid. Maybe she expected me to fall apart when she cried. Maybe she thought I'd rush to comfort her like I used to. That I'd still play the role of the guy who never stopped trying. But I didn't move. Instead, I said, I think you only realized what you had once you saw someone else see it too. She didn't deny it. Didn't say a word. And that silence said more than anything she'd tried to explain. That moment, right there on that sidewalk, with the wind picking up and the sky turning gray, was when I realized I didn't want her back. But I wasn't ready to admit that. Not yet. Not until I saw what she'd do next. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was sad, or angry, or even confused. I didn't sleep because my brain wouldn't stop replaying the look in her eyes when she realized she couldn't control the version of me that was no longer hers. That realization seemed to shake her more than the end of our marriage ever did. It was like she had built a safety net in her head, believing I'd always be there, always stuck in her orbit, waiting for her to feel something again. But that version of me didn't exist anymore. The next morning, I got up early, showered without staring at myself in the mirror for the first time in weeks, and went to the only place that had made me feel halfway human since all of this started, the bookstore. I didn't expect Marin to be there. That would have been too perfect, too movie-like. But life surprised me. Again, she was standing near the nonfiction aisle, flipping through a travel memoir, and when she saw me, her mouth curved into this small, tired smile like she'd already guessed I might show up. You found your way back, she said, gently closing the book. I never really left, I replied, even though we both knew I hadn't just meant the store. She didn't ask about Cora. She didn't press. She just gestured toward the cafe section, and we sat again, same seats, same view of the parking lot. But this time, there was a different energy between us. Not flirtation. Not romance. Something softer. Like the beginning of a rescue. I ran into her, I said after a moment of silence. Marin nodded, stirring her tea. I figured. You looked like a man who'd seen a ghost yesterday. I think I saw one again last night. Only this time, she was crying. That made her pause. Was that satisfying? I blinked. What? When you saw her break down, she said, her voice calm but razor-sharp. Did it feel like justice? I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how. Because part of me had wanted to see that. Not because I'm cruel, but because I needed proof that I hadn't imagined the weight of everything I'd carried alone for so long. But satisfaction? That wasn't what I felt. It was more like sorrow for her. For who she used to be. For what we'd let rot between us. No, I said finally. It didn't feel good. It just felt too late. Marin didn't say anything. She just reached into her bag and handed me a small notebook. It was old, leather-bound, and clearly used. I looked at her, puzzled. It's blank, I said, flipping through the pages. It's for you, she replied. Sometimes it helps to put things down in a place that doesn't talk back. I smiled genuinely. Are you always this weird? She grinned. Only for broken people who don't realize they're healing. I left that bookstore with a notebook tucked under my arm, and something I hadn't felt in a long time buzzing in my chest. Possibility. Not love. Not hope. Just the idea that maybe, just maybe, life wasn't entirely over just because one person stopped believing in you. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. And when I did, I immediately recognized the voice on the other end. Quiet, unsteady. Ellis, it's Cora. I didn't say anything. She kept going. I need to see you. There's something I haven't told you. About everything. And just like that, whatever peace I'd started to build cracked again, just enough to let in the storm I thought I'd already survived. I stared at my phone for a full 30 seconds after she said that. There's something I haven't told you. Those words crawled into my ear like cold water and sank right into my stomach. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part wanted to scream, why now? But all I managed to say, in a voice I barely recognized, was, when? She said, tonight. Please, just let me talk. I should have said no. I had every reason to say no. But when you spend years loving someone, part of you keeps answering their calls, even when your mind is screaming not to. So I said fine. One conversation. That's it. We met in the back booth of a diner we used to go to years ago, before things fell apart. It was almost empty, save for a few tired waitresses and an older couple sharing a milkshake 2 tables over. She was already there when I walked in, nursing a cup of coffee with both hands like she was clinging to it for stability. Her makeup was minimal, rare for her. She looked pale, raw, like she hadn't slept in days. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. Then she looked up and locked eyes with me. That same panic was there, but now it was wrapped in something heavier. Guilt. I'm not here to fight, I said quietly as I slid into the booth. She shook her head. I don't want to fight. I owe you the truth. The full truth. I folded my arms. Go on. She inhaled deeply, then spoke so softly I had to lean forward to hear. There was someone else, she admitted. Not after we started falling apart. Before. A long time before. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. But inside, my ribs tightened like a vice. Who? I asked, though I didn't know if I actually wanted the answer. Grant, she said. That name hit me like a punch to the chest. Grant had been a mutual friend. We met him at a charity event. He was charming, helpful, harmless, or so I thought. He came over for dinner once, maybe twice. He and I had exchanged beers, talked about sports, joked about office politics. And now, sitting across from me, my wife was telling me that the man who'd once shaken my hand had been inside my home for a very different reason. It was a mistake, she whispered, as if that could soften the blow. It was only twice. But after that, I couldn't stop seeing the guilt in your eyes, even though you didn't know. It made me feel poisoned. I sat back, disgusted. So that's why you said you felt nothing? Because you felt guilty? She shook her head quickly. No, I said that because I was drowning in it. I couldn't be around you and pretend I deserved you anymore. So I convinced myself that I didn't feel anything, that it was over, that if I could just detach, I wouldn't have to confess. I was silent for a while. Then I asked the question that really mattered. Why are you telling me this now? She looked up. Her voice cracked. Because when I saw you with that woman, something inside me shattered. Not because I was jealous, but because it was the first time I saw you smile, really smile, since before I broke us. I scoffed. You didn't just break us, Cora. You broke me. She nodded, eyes glassy. I know. I stood up. I couldn't stay in that booth any longer. The walls felt too close. My skin itched with betrayal and exhaustion. She reached for my wrist as I passed, but I pulled away gently. I'm not your safe place anymore, I said, louder than I meant to. You took that away. I walked out without looking back, but her voice caught me one last time, trembling behind me. Ellis, I'm sorry. I really am. But please, don't disappear again. Outside, I stood in the cold air, breathing like I'd just run a mile. My mind was a war zone. All the healing I'd started to build was now tangled in something I never wanted to face. And as I turned the corner to walk back to my car, someone else was standing there. Marin. She had seen everything. She didn't say anything right away. Marin just stood there under the flickering streetlight, her arms crossed over her jacket, eyes searching my face like she wasn't sure which version of me she was meeting. I froze when I saw her. My heart thudded against my ribs like it had been caught doing something wrong, though I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't invited Cora's guilt. I hadn't asked for any of this. But still, shame clung to me like wet clothing. You followed me? I asked, breath clouding in the cold night air. She shook her head, stepping closer. No. I was coming back from a reading down the street. I saw you go in. I waited because I wasn't sure if I should, if you'd want. You saw everything, I interrupted, more bitterly than I meant. I saw enough, she said calmly. Enough to know it was a storm you didn't ask for. I leaned against the brick wall behind me and let out a long, slow exhale. My hands were trembling slightly, not from the cold, but from the emotional whiplash of that booth. She cheated on me, I said, voice barely above a whisper. A long time ago. With someone I knew. Marin didn't react like I thought she would. No gasp. No sympathy-soaked expression. Just a steady nod, as if she'd already sensed it deep down. That explains the way you carry yourself, she said. Like you're still holding on to invisible bruises. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You ever feel like you're just the leftover version of who you used to be? Like you're walking around in someone else's body, one that still flinches when no one's touching you. Her expression softened. Yeah, she said. I do. We stood there in silence for a while. Cars passed. Wind curled around the corners of buildings. Somewhere a siren wailed in the distance, distant and hollow. Then she said something I didn't expect. Come with me. I blinked. Where? She tilted her head. Does it matter? And for once, it didn't. I needed to not think, not analyze. Just move forward, even if it was only for a few blocks. She led me to a tiny late-night gallery tucked between two abandoned storefronts. It was the kind of place you'd never find unless you were lost. Inside, soft music drifted through the air, and paintings lined the exposed brick walls, most of them strange, abstract, violent with color. I stood in front of one canvas, swirling with red and gold streaks, trying to make sense of the chaos. That one's called Aftermath, Marin said behind me. I nodded slowly. Looks like it hurts. Yeah, she murmured. But it's still hanging. She turned to me then, hands stuffed in her coat pockets. You know, Ellis. I didn't ask for details because I didn't need to hear the story to know the ending. You stayed too long in a place that stopped holding you. I looked at her. What if I'm not ready to move on? She shrugged gently. Then don't. But don't keep bleeding just to prove how deep the cut was. That hit me harder than anything Cora had said all night. I stood there for a while, just breathing, letting the words settle in my chest like slow embers. Marin didn't try to fill the silence, didn't force anything. She just let me exist. Like that was enough. Later, when she walked me back to my car, she paused at the curb and gave me the softest smile I'd ever seen. You don't owe her closure, Ellis. You owe yourself peace. I drove home with those words echoing in my head. And when I checked my phone hours later, I saw Cora had texted again. One word. Please. But this time. I didn't answer. I stared at that single word on my phone screen, please. It sat there glowing like a dying ember, desperate to reignite something that had long since turned to ash. Cora's message didn't enrage me. It didn't pull me back into the spiral of grief or guilt or wondering what I could have done differently. No, the only thing it did was confirm what I already knew. She was no longer the center of my story, and I wasn't the broken man who once begged for her to feel something. For the first time in what felt like years, I turned off my phone without answering. No explanation. No apology. No looking back. I slid it into the drawer next to the bed in my small temporary rental, took a long breath, and walked outside just as the first light of morning cut through the clouds. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But steadily, like the first quiet thaw of winter. I could still feel the bruises from what I'd been through, but they no longer defined the shape of me. I was healing, even if it was uneven, even if some days I still felt hollow. I spent the next few weeks pouring myself into that little leather notebook Marin had given me. I wrote everything. Not just the pain, but the pieces I wanted to keep, the parts of myself that deserved to be remembered without being tied to her. The laughter. The small joys. The nights I stayed up sketching just to feel like I had a voice again. I started going back to work, and to my surprise, my students noticed. One of them, a shy 7th grader who rarely spoke, handed me a drawing and said, "You look like you're smiling for real now." I kept that sketch, framed it, hung it above my desk like a quiet reminder that even kids can see what adults try to hide. And yes, Marin stayed in my life, but not like some rom-com cliché where we ran into each other and fell in love overnight. No, It was slower than that, healthier than that. It started with coffee again, then walks, then long, vulnerable conversations in parking lots after closing time. She never pushed, never expected, never filled silence with unnecessary words. She simply showed up, again and again. One night, weeks after our talk outside the diner, I invited her to the lake. I hadn't been back since everything happened. The tree was still there. So was the bench. But the ghost of who I used to be didn't haunt the place anymore. Instead, I found myself watching the water with quiet gratitude, not because it held memories of what I'd lost, but because it now held space for what I'd survived. Marin sat next to me, her fingers loosely brushing mine, and I realized something I didn't think I ever would again. I wasn't afraid of what came next. She turned to me, her smile soft and cautious. "You okay?" I nodded. "I think I finally am." We sat there until the sun dipped behind the horizon. No declarations, no pressure, just peace. That night, I went home, opened Cora's last message one more time, and deleted it. Not out of spite, but because I no longer needed to carry the version of myself that waited for her to change. I had changed. And for the first time in a long, long time, that was enough.